everyone, welcome. Today's video is called Relationships Matter, and that may be a statement of the obvious for many of you, but please bear with us because I think there's something here for everyone to learn from. As you know, we usually start these videos by asking you to press pause and we give you some reflection questions. Well, today is a bit more of a brain teaser, so press pause and work through this brain teaser.
Here is the brain teaser. Sit for around 5 minutes thinking about what makes a person work. By that we mean what makes a person tick. How do you motivate somebody? Then when you think you've got that clear in your mind, take out a pen and a piece of paper and draw a picture. I don't literally mean a picture, I mean a mind map where you write down words, link them, brainstorm, delete words, start again, wherever you go, but make extant on the piece of paper a full representation of your understanding of how people work at work, what makes them work. Pause the video now and spend a good 5 minutes on this exercise. When you're ready, come back to the remainder of the video.
So don't skip this part. This is part of the warming up to the whole video and is just as important as anything that we're going to actually teach you today. You know, introspection and reflecting on your own knowledge is really key to the way we work. So now, have a look at this slide and the 3 questions that this slide poses for you.
So here's the task. There are 3 different tasks. We're asking you to think about 3 different scenarios. The first one, as it says, is you are trying to work with a group of peers. So the idea here, the point we're making is there isn't a single leader or boss in the room. You're all of the same level. Everyone wants to deliver a very good result, but someone is not delivering their work that the rest of the group is relying on. So look back at your map about how you think people work. And then draw from that map, how do you think you'd respond? What is it you think you'd do to try and address this issue? What's relevant from your map, from your picture, from your thoughts about how people work that will help you address this scenario? The second scenario takes a completely different approach. This time you're the boss of a team. You're in charge. This time you're asked the simple question, how do you motivate that team? So look back at your words. What would you do? What would you pick from your map? What might be different from your choices? Or what might be exactly the same? And then finally, the third task is the team you're working in get along really well, they work very hard, but you're faced with a really big problem and you can't find a solution. Again, look back at your map and decide what you're going to draw on. What are the ideas, what helps you when you think about how you would do this? Again, of course, to do this, we're asking you to pause. So pause this tape now and think through how you would answer and address each of those 3 different scenarios drawing on your single map.
So welcome back. I hope you learnt something and I hope you were challenged by that task. We're going to apply that to a real life situation. This is Phil, my co-author on Coaching on the Go, and I think that Phil has a story from his past which relates very directly to this idea. So let's ask you some questions about your case study, Phil.
Sure thing, no problem at all. So this is something from my own personal history. It was a really important thing on my own personal life journey, really. And the situation was I worked in a very large, complex global company which had come together in a consortium with 4 other big global companies. And the work that we were trying to do was going, frankly, very badly and had been doing for a long time. So almost 2 years, the problems were getting ever bigger. We were failing to deliver on time, failing to deliver what was wanted. We were having lots of difficulties with each other and also with our client, which is a very complicated client. And I was drafted in as a troubleshooter I would say, had yet another troubleshooter. There were already several people in there who was being asked to come in and try and help out. And my background at that time was I was a finance professional. So, you know, my background was as a banker of finance, corporate financier, and as a finance director. So I was bringing that background in to try and help.
So stop there and let's relate that back to this idea of having a mental model of how people work. What do you think you thought about how people worked as you were parachuted in as a troubleshooter? What was in your head about the levers that you were going to work with that was going to bring about substantial change, recognising, of course, other people had tried before you, but clearly you had something special to bring to the party. So what was your thinking as you first entered the system?
Well, I think I'd have to be honest and say I'm not sure I was really thinking about any of those things in the way you've described it, even though that would seem remarkable, right, when you look back at it. Possibly that was affected by the fact that there were 5 consortium partners, so there were lots of people acting as troubleshooters, not just me, you know, so that was happening. But to answer your question, I think I was driven by what had given me success in my career to that point. And what had given me success in my career at that point was this focus on the numbers. So as a senior finance guy, or even on my whole career, I was recognised for having the ability to notice things in those numbers that were inconsistent. You know, looking for the things that literally didn't add up or were inconsistent with the stories. I had a reputation for remembering what had come before. So if the story had changed, I would spot that change and make sure that by taking that approach and really keeping an intense level of detail focus on those numbers and what we needed to achieve, that would push, I hesitate to use the word motivate, I'm not sure it was thought through, but it would motivate people to deliver. You know, I'd be looking at what are the numbers we have to do this month. Are we trying to save cost? Are we actually trying to spend more money? Sometimes that's possible. Are we trying to drive revenue? What is it? And how do I push the levers to try and get people to achieve that result? So I think that was my mental model.
So, summarising up to this point, success in your career had largely relied on this ability to look at figures, look at numbers, and find discontinuities, to find the story that the numbers were telling, or the story that you wanted the numbers to tell, and the people's activity that was going to drive that. So your ability to link sort of activity and numbers and outcomes was the basis of your career up until that point.
Yep.
But it was kind of at a technical level, I guess, but a very valuable technical level because you were extremely senior.
I suppose. I mean, I think what I'd say, it was technical in a finance sense.
Okay.
So I worked in an IT company.
Yep.
I didn't really understand the IT.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
But certainly that part of my career, yes, that's what drove the success. I think, or helped me achieve that personal success, shall we say, of making sure that other people did understand their numbers and what was happening for them, and they would be able to change the operational levers underneath to achieve the success.
Yeah. Got it. So, bring us up to speed with the story. So you have arrived, there are 5 big organisations in this coalition, not going well, and you're sent on your white horse to come and do something. What did you do?
Well, I think it's less about what I did, to be honest, because I carried on being me in a sense. What was important was that there was a small group of consultants, internal consultants from one of the companies, who'd been there for a while. They called themselves change consultants, but they worked in the field of organisation development and leadership. And they were desperately trying to get people to understand one single thing. And that single thing was that all of these problems we had in the organisation were behavioural. They were about the different behaviours that we were bringing to the table. And fundamentally, the fact that of the 5 global companies, they all had very different ways of doing things. And to give an example, the company I came from, if a client had a problem, our normal reaction as a system reaction was to go and solve the problem and then ask for the money. So our first thing to do would be go and help the client, and then ask for the money. One of our other businesses that we're working with in this consortium, they had exactly the opposite. So if a client had a problem, their first question was to say, what's our contractual position here? Are we obliged to solve this problem or not? And then, if not, they would go in and say to the client, how much are you going to pay? You need to sort out the payment and then we'll sort out the problem. Now, it may sound to you as a listener that one of those two things is the right answer, and that you should take one approach, not both of those approaches. They can't both happen. However, both those companies were highly successful global companies, so it had worked for them as a culture.
Yeah.
So although I came from one of those,
Yeah.
and it always seems sensible to say you help the customer first, the other culture would say that was our philosophy as well, but we can only help that client if we're helping ourselves. And so we will start with that question of the contractual position.
I'm going to stop you there, just because the thing that came to my mind before you said that was exactly the opposite, which was here is two gorgeous examples of corporate culture and corporate behaviour. Both make sense. So you can't actually say that there is a logic for choosing one above the other. You know, they're both equally right. And I think that's very often the case in leadership. Really knotty leadership issues often don't have a manifestly right answer. You know, it's always a weighing up. I know that's completely self-evident, but we don't see it until we're confronted with it, that both things can be true. Yeah,
absolutely. So as I go back, this small group of consultants were saying to the leadership team, this is your issue. So, and the problem is you keep bringing in troubleshooters, people like me, who are making it worse because I'm going in and doing what my culture says is the right answer and basically trying to just push that agenda, that way of doing things, with the mindset that's closed, that thinks, well, everybody else is just wrong. They haven't understood this problem. They clearly haven't understood. The more I go at them, the more they'll understand and they'll realise that my way of doing things is the right way of doing things. Mm. And of course, all the other companies were sending in people doing that same sort of approach. So essentially I was coming and making it worse, not better.
Yeah. So, what happened? I guess... What brought this all to a head? What changed? How did you become convinced that something needed to be done in a different manner?
Well, I think, to be honest, the answer is the idea of a light bulb moment. So when this message was being pushed by this group of consultants, and I was fortunate enough to be involved in a conversation with them, I don't remember that any specific little thing happened. I just got it. My brain went, oh my gosh, you're right. That's the issue, and it's when you point it out, it's so self-evident. These companies have completely different ways of approaching issues, and because we've got such a complex consortium arrangement with 5 different companies and a client which is also very complex, we're not able to notice them. We're just always trying to solve things our way, and actually we need to sit back and try and address those behaviours and the relationships between everybody, because of course it's the relationships between people that have to adjust to make those behaviours adjust.
I think that there's one question that comes to mind for me, which is, you know, the map that you had going in and the map that you then developed or changed or amended or reconstructed perhaps.
Yeah.
Can you just, I've heard one particular dimension changed for you, thinking that there is a right way, to thinking there might be quite a few right ways, you know, that there was validity in several different options. But can you just sort of point to a couple of the other dimensions that changed for you during that?
I think for me the big change was simply this point that relationships are at the core of everything. I think that's simply the big point. And it's, of course I would say I already worked with relationships. I would think I had great relationships, you know, that sort of idea, but not understanding the significance of them, and that we have to enable everybody to see that same idea and to think about how they might change their perspective. So in terms of the map, before I would have had that idea that finance, the numbers, will drive everybody else to success. Whereas the new map would have relationships probably in the centre of it, or if not in the centre, certainly as a key component, and then lots of things would spin off that. How are different individuals or organisations motivated? What makes them behave the way they are behaving? What are the things that sit behind that behaviour? And we've got to have an exploration of those things together in an open format, which will take a long time before we'd get to success. So that your question of what makes people tick, how do people work, I would say relationships are at the core of that.
So very nicely, we're back to the beginning. Relationships matter. And that leads me to ask you once again to pause the video. We've got some questions that we want you to reflect on and answer. And as usual, we're inviting you to take these really seriously, not to rush through them, not to treat them as ancillary to the rest of the video, but instead to really apply yourself to these questions and the challenges they may raise for you. Where perhaps have you had a failure of work relationships? And what have been the consequences? When you do invest in relationships, how do you approach it? And then what happens? So welcome back. And as I suggested when we went into those slides, the reflection questions are not ancillary to the main body of the video. We really encourage you to take a generous amount of time to really investigate how you think and to get it out on a piece of paper or onto your iPad so you can see the deep-held assumptions that you're making about how people tick, how you work with people when you make the assumption that that's the way they're thinking. As Phil has illustrated in his case study, if you're making these assumptions, then it limits the ways in which you work with other people. But when you begin to see the limitations and the assumptions that you're making, it broadens your repertoire as a leader, as a coach. It enables you to make wider choices, different choices. So this reflection is really important to help you generate more self-awareness and also more awareness of others, because no two people are the same. You can read more about some of these ideas in our book. It's called Coaching on the Go. And I hope that you'll join us for our next video. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.